Hi everyone, my name is Christine Paszko, and today we're going to be talking about accelerating compliance with laboratory software, LIMS, and automation. Today, laboratories are faced with increasing pressures to generate high quality data cost effectively and timely. And there are so many challenges and regulatory pressures that are faced by laboratories. One of the best ways to address these pressures is through automation. Implementing a LIMS, a Laboratory Information Management System, helps with not only creating quotes and sending out invoices, but also with sample tracking, printing out automated chain of custody reports, printing out automated final reports, being able to interface all the instrumentation in the laboratory so that there's no opportunity for transcription errors. The data comes right off the instrument and goes into the LIMS so that scientists can basically validate and approve data, which leads to very quick turnaround times and also the ability to have automated reports, as well as having automated reports on a client portal that's available 24/7. This cuts down on paperwork that the laboratory needs to deal with. This eliminates calls to the laboratories because clients can now access their own reports, and many laboratories also post their invoices on the client portal so that it's a true 24/7 user experience. Having the right tools in place results in higher customer satisfaction. Our agenda today is going to be looking at introduction to LIMS, looking at all the data that there is to manage, discussing ISO certification, as well as key features and functions in the LIMS, power of a LIMS plus automation, and then also automated reporting. All right, our learning objectives for today are to understand the role of a LIMS in a QMS or quality management system, and then also learning about all the other systems that can be tightly integrated with the LIMS. So these systems include ERP systems, they include invoicing or accounting packages, they include nutritional labeling systems if you're doing food testing. So there's so many other systems that can be integrated. Today, it's all about getting all the data pulled together rather than having separate silos of data for a more efficient management of the operation and also faster reporting. And then finally, to become familiar with key features and functions of the LIMS. We talked earlier about quoting, invoicing, sample tracking, positive ID, barcoding, instrument integration, shelf life studies can be set up, chemical and reagent inventory, as well as managing resources, so employee training records, as well as instrument calibration, maintenance, and repairs. There's so many different types of testing being done, everything from raw material to finished products. Edibles adds a whole new layer. It's a very sophisticated and challenging matrix to perform sample preparation on, and when it's placed in all these different products, it makes it just a little bit more interesting. Why do we test cannabis? Well, there's several reasons. Obvious one is potency. The higher potency, the higher the price. There's also testing done for safety concerns. So if there's bacteria, mycotoxins, pesticides for chemical agents, heavy metals, foreign material, any solvents. So it's very important that the quality of the product be tested for all these different parameters. Why are LIMS critical? Well, there's so many different data points that need to be accounted for. So when you're doing testing for water quality that's being placed on the plants that are being grown, you're looking for chemicals in the water that could have a negative effect on the plants. On the final product, you're looking for potency once the product is placed into different food matrices. So it's really important to manage all this data. And when you're in a laboratory, you're not just managing the unique identifier of each sample that's being tested, but you're also looking at the quality of that data. And to look at the quality of that data, you need to look at the chemicals and reagents and supplies that are used in the laboratory, the dates that they were opened, who opened them, what the expiration date is, what the lot number is, if your instrument is properly calibrated, when was the last time it was calibrated, was any maintenance done on that piece of equipment, when, what was the maintenance. So all of that needs to be tracked as well. looking at your employee training records, who is trained to perform which test. Auditors want to make sure that the people that are actually performing the analysis have proper training, so they'll want to see proof of this training. So in the LIMS, you can attach copies of training records or any quizzes that were taken as part of that training. Within the system, you can also assign privileges and permissions. So this ensures that only certain people can access certain information. So if someone's in login, they don't need to have permissions or privileges to the QC functionality within the system. Also, being able to go paperless. This not only saves time, but also cuts down on cost, reducing your carbon footprint. It just makes sense. Today, nobody wants to have binders and binders and binders of data. It's very hard to access that data, and if there's a fire or something, if the paper is missing, that data is lost forever. Having it electronically allows there to be backup of that data, and that data can also be accessed from different locations. When people look at different LIMS systems, it's really important to understand the different types of technology that's available, what language the LIMS was written in, if it's in the cloud or on premises, what reporting tools are used, if it's configurable, or if customization is needed. You don't want to go the customization route because that makes the LIMS that's unique to your laboratory. You want to look for configurability and flexibility. And then also support is very important. I spoke with someone last week that said they were paying a lot for the annual support agreement, but the support was horrible and they were getting very frustrated to the point where they were looking at replacing the system. So, never discount support. Oftentimes, that's something that makes or breaks a solution, because being able to extract the most value from the system is critical. So the training and support offerings are key. And then also making sure the system's future-proof, so that in 2 or 3 years you don't have to buy a new system because the technology has been outdated. Look at the reputation of the provider, certifications that they hold. If they're in the UK, they should have TICKET. If they're in the US, ISO certifications from the International Standards Organization. Look at ease of use. Is it intuitive, or is it very difficult to learn how to use? And then make sure you're understanding the return on investment. The proper due diligence has been done. When we talk about cloud hosting, or SaaS, which stands for software as a service, versus on-premises. If the system is on-premises, your IT team is responsible for securing the server environment, making sure there's a hardened firewall, that your network switches have software that's been updated, making sure that all the connections to the server are operating as designed, making sure that each user can see the server, making sure that backups are done daily, making sure that there's monitoring and maintenance going on of that server environment. When it's in the cloud, all that is taken care of for you. All you need is a solid internet connection. So the vendor's responsible for automatic updates to your test dev environment, answering any support questions, making sure that the daily backups are done. So there's pros and cons to each. We really see a huge move toward the cloud. It just makes sense financially because it is more cost affordable than building everything on your own facility, just because you can leverage the cost of many people being set up in the cloud. Looking at sample tracking and inventory control, barcoding is very popular and very powerful. Not only does it allow people to scan many samples quickly, but it's also very accurate. It allows laboratories to go paperless in that they can basically scan the samples throughout the laboratory. For those people that like to have paper for example, bench sheets or work lists, as they're often called, you can basically set up your run and then scan all the samples into the system. The system will create the work list, send it electronically to the instrument. The instrument can run all the samples, send the work list back to the LIMS, and that results in a very efficient process and very rapid results. It also allows people to track the samples in real time. Dashboards are very powerful as they include key performance indicators. So a laboratory manager might have different KPIs than analyst. An analyst may want to know what their backlog is. They may be interested in their work list for the day, where a lab manager may care about the turnaround time of the laboratory, or TAT. The manager may care about the workload. Do they have enough staff and instrumentation to manage the samples that are coming in? So the beauty of dashboards is that everyone can see what's important to them. Managers and directors can also take a look at, financial information in terms of who's the largest customer, who's behind on their invoices. So there's a lot of information that's available on the dashboard. Instrument integration is increasingly becoming important. Today, we don't do a project that doesn't involve instrument integration. It just makes financial sense. You don't want to have highly trained resources entering results into a spreadsheet or into a LIMS. It doesn't make sense. Everyone that's listening to this call is a knowledge worker, and we need to work smarter. So, by having the instruments integrated with the LIMS, not only does it increase accuracy and throughput, it avoids, entering data into multiple systems, and it also has a very fast ROI. I've seen it as fast as 3 months, but typical is 6 to 9 months based on your sample workflow and how many samples you're analyzing. How does it work? It's really pretty straightforward. We look for a CSV or comma separated value, an Excel file or text, whatever that instrument puts out. Unfortunately, there's no standardization in instrument exports, so every instrument puts out a different format in a different order. And then what can be done is a parser can be created that takes that output file and rearranges it to put it into a file that the LIMS is expecting, so it can be automatically imported. And the same can be done with data that's sent out to subcontracting laboratories, so that that data can automatically be imported in the LIMS as well. So I often talk with laboratories that send out tests that they don't do, and I say, well, where does that data go? And sadly, it often ends up in a file cabinet or on a folder, on a shared drive in a PDF format. That data should be pulled in with the rest of the data for that sample, so that all of the data is in one location, so that you can do some statistical analysis, look at some business intelligence, look at data like how many tests did we do of all the different types, how much work was sent out, what did it cost us, so that managers can make decisions on when it makes sense to bring testing in-house. Another area that's rapidly expanding is the use of sensors. Sensor technology is truly the future. With sensors, you can record things such as temperature, light, humidity, and all that data is backed up into the cloud. So the way this system works is it takes readings every 15 seconds. It has this dashboard in the cloud that can be accessed anywhere, and then it's linked to the LIMS, so that for an auditor, in the LIMS, it'll place the max, the min, and the average temperature for that day. For microbiology samples, it'll actually take 2 readings 4 hours apart and place that data in the LIMS. So what this does is make laboratories bulletproof for their audits. Another nice thing is that it's cheap insurance on your equipment, because if the temperature dips below a preset limit that you've set, it'll actually send an alert to your cell phone and also send out an email. And you can also have a CC list. So not only does it monitor the health of your equipment, but it also gives you an alert if there's going to be a problem. And if you have a lot of kits or reagents, consumables in your fridge or freezer, I know I did when I worked in the laboratory. It was very expensive if a refrigerator went down over the weekend and everything was lost. It also eliminates paper. So with sensors, it's really going to change the future, and it's going to take away a lot of the mundane tasks that doesn't make sense for people to do. The other thing that's worth mentioning is the thermocouples are NIST certified, and they can be calibrated remotely or sent in for the certificate. Now, if we look at the total solution, all the different elements of the LIMS, what we can see is that you have an underlying database, whether it's SQL Server or Oracle. It's an SQL, structured query language database, that all the data has referential integrity. All the data resides in. And laboratories are under increased pressure to track everything, just the metadata with the sample, the unique ID for the sample, all the descriptive information on when and where the sample was collected, who collected it with all the date and time stamps. There's support for barcoding so that labels can automatically be generated, the ability to look at dashboards with a data grid, the ability to create an unlimited number of custom reports, your certificate of analysis report. And these reports are one thing that can set laboratories apart from each other, because if you think about it, at the end of the day, the report is your final product. There's so much that goes on behind the scenes to generate that report, but it's very important that the report is user-friendly, easy to understand, makes sense quickly to the client so that they don't have to decipher or hunt for the result in the QC data. There's also the ability to schedule studies, so if you have to collect samples at a specific time, or if you need to do shelf life studies on your finished products, you can also set those up, and it can send out reminders via email. Also can log in what test needs to be performed. You can also have integration with different instrumentation. This just makes sense. We covered that earlier, so that data is electronically being uploaded to the SQL database. There's no opportunity for transcription errors. And then the ability to automatically email, print, or fax, if anyone's still doing that, from the system. And then past the firewall, you have additional functionality with iMobile solutions, leveraging mobile technology if you need to collect data in the field, do QC checks at the plant. Then also a client portal so that 24/7 clients can not only access their results, but also download locked PDF reports of their C of A. They can download PDFs of their invoice. So it allows the laboratory to do business 24/7. Now, if we look at key features and the internal chain of custody, this is very important in laboratories that are dealing with controlled substances. So you want to make sure that you manage and monitor the samples as it's going through the laboratory testing process. So if you receive the sample, there's a formal receipt process with date and time stamps, who received the sample, where the sample is placed, how much of the sample was received. If someone removes the sample to perform testing on it, how much sample they removed, what is the remaining sample volume, and then also when samples are disposed of. That's also very important to track that. So it's very important to understand the importance of the internal chain of custody and make sure that everyone in the laboratory is trained on best practices. The ability to look at data with statistical analysis software is incredibly powerful, and today there are even AI tools that can be leveraged. So having all the data, first of all, in one secure SQL database is critical, and then running statistical analysis tools against that database for a subset of data that's been queried is also amazing in terms of being able to view trends that you may not have been aware of. And then also having integrated charting to look at trends in the data, how the samples are performing over time if you're looking at a particular field or a finished product. So there's a lot of information to be mined in the raw data. Data entry and reporting, it's all about speed. So if you're doing a high volume of samples, looking at batch order login, most of the data is coming off of instruments. I'd say for our laboratories, probably 90% plus of the data is coming in automatically from instruments. For microbiology and some other tests where there is no instrument or there's a subjective interpretation, that data must be added by hand, but for the most part, it's automated. Rapid accessioning of the samples, so being able to barcode in samples where kits were sent out for collection and when they come back in, that can be very quickly scanned. Sending out an automated certificate of analysis report, an invoice report is huge in terms of time savings. There's no mailing costs, there's no paper costs, printer costs, toner costs. That's all pushed to the portal. Clients can access that themselves. Again, eliminating paper and then having higher customer satisfaction. This is an example of just a typical canned C of A report. It basically lists all the parameters, and you can see it's really easy to see the results of the test. You can even leverage colors if you want to highlight any tests that exceeded limits that were set up. You can also digitize signatures so that when the user logs into the system, it'll know who that user is and insert their digitized signature into that report as the approver of those results. And not only does automated reporting save time, but it also results in increased accuracy and higher customer satisfaction because they can get their results faster. CRM, being able to access data in real time is huge. So allowing clients to log into the portal and see the status of their testing so they can see that the sample has been received, the results have been entered, but they haven't been validated yet. If you want to turn that on for them to see, or you can just turn it to the position so they only see validated approved results. There's a lot of different options. Many customers also require electronic data deliverables. These can also be shared as an attachment to the client portal. Instead of having a locked PDF, you can have an Excel file shared or a CSV output. They can also see the sample status if they have multiple samples through the system. They can query the database and look at the history of the samples that they've sent. So it's a very powerful tool. There's also a LIMS kiosk where clients can send their results to the laboratory 24/7, provide credit card information for prepaid samples. This allows the laboratory to know what samples are coming to be analyzed. We talked a little before about mobile technology. This is also a very significant time and cost saver. It allows laboratories to receive data from field tests that are done, whether it's pH or moisture or any type of checks that the laboratory offers. This not only saves in time, but it also reduces the amount of paper that's used. Reduces costs because there's no need to re-enter data from paper forms into the LIMS. And the beauty is this can be leveraged on rugged laptops, on tablets, on iPhones. It's really a game changer. In LIMS and laboratory process automation, it's all about, at the end of the day, high data integrity, having high data quality, because you want to have results that are real. In getting real results, you have to track all the other information in the laboratory in terms of, was the instrument calibrated? Was the analyst trained? Were the reagents in spec? Were they expired? Or, when was the bottle opened of the standard? All that information needs to be tracked and traced. Laboratories that can manage their time more efficiently are going to see higher customer satisfaction rates, higher efficiency, as well as profitability. And all this needs to be done making sure that you're in compliance with all the regulations. Cannabis laboratories need to be ISO 17025 certified. Be aware of laboratories that don't have the certification because this is critical. And then they also have to have integration with a number of other packages for state reporting, such as metrics. So it's important that you have a solid solution in place in the laboratory to manage the samples, and that everyone in the laboratory understands the role of the different types of technology and work smarter. There's many, many benefits to automation. They begin with being able to automatically generate high quality reports, being able to pull up data during an audit, whether it's a chain of custody or whether if it's an invoice report or a final analysis report, making sure that there's security in the system, that each user has a role and a profile, and they've been set up in the system to access just the data that they need and not data that they shouldn't be having access to. The ability to generate work lists so analysts always know exactly what work is needed. Backlog reports so that managers can see which work is waiting to be completed, being able to manage instrument calibration data and employee training records, being able to have all of the key instruments interfaced into the LIMS for cost savings and higher data integrity, been managing your chemical and reagent inventory in the laboratory, as well as complaints against the laboratory with corrective and preventative actions, surveying customers periodically to make sure that everything that the laboratory is doing is working well, and then also looking at advanced analytics and trending. What is the data telling you? What additional services can you offer to your clients in terms of letting them look at their historical data? And then also having all that data securely stored over time, if anyone has the need to go back a few years and pull a report that they may have lost. And then the ability for automatic notifications, alerts, and emails is a huge time saver. Summary, the right LIMS is critical, as well as automation for the cannabis testing lab. Today it costs probably $2.5 to $3 million to start a lab from scratch, so it's critical that you have the key tools in place to operate efficiently. There's a lot of pressure, not just regulatory, but business competition. So those laboratories that operate lean and have the tools in place to ensure that they're not wasting their resources are going to be the ones that survive and thrive. And then also looking at, doing everything on premises versus the cloud. The cloud is much more cost effective. It has 99.99% uptime guarantees. It can be accessed anywhere there's a secure internet connection. And then also looking at eliminating mundane tasks for users such as, dual entry, printing out labels by hand, automating reporting are all huge time savers. And other advantages are having better communication across the organization. So having everyone be able to log in to view data rather than a lot of phone calls or emails back and forth saves time and money. Making sure that the facilities are compliant. So ISO 17025, making sure they're prepared for their audits. Other options are single sign-on or multi-factor authentication for security of the data. The LIMS must also be 21 CFR Part 11 compliant so that there's full support for electronic records. And then also have a comprehensive audit trail as well as an internal chain of custody.